to the latest edition of Cult Classic Movies. This week we're going back into the vault. We're spanning back more than roughly 40 years in terms of this week's iconic classic movie. We're going right back to 1989, and in terms of around that era, there was an iconic sort of movie called Bloodsport, but its big rival at the time was Bloodfist. And if you love Bloodsport, no doubt about it, you'd obviously love Bloodfist. And we're delighted to have the main star of the Bloodfist franchise, the one and only Don the Dragon Wilson. As we know, Don, a US martial artist, 11-time professional kickboxing world champion, 47 knockouts in 4 decades in the Kickboxing Hall of Fame, renowned as one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. And Don, I suppose I'd love to be able to talk to you about your sporting career, but in terms of this, we're just going to be featuring roughly about the movie career and obviously the Bloodfist sort of franchise. And tell me, as an iconic martial artist, where did the idea of Bloodfist come about? Where was it spawned, and who presented this idea to you back in 1989 in terms of going down this route?
Well, the movie was made in 1988. It was released in 1989. We actually shot it around, I think it was in October of 88, right around there. I flew to Manila to make the movie. But of course, the idea was not created by Roger Corman. The idea was Canon Films, which had Bloodsport.
Yeah.
And they did that. They offered it to Chuck Norris, I understand, and Chuck turned it down. Chuck saw it as a step backwards for his career. He thought, well, I'll have to take my shirt off and just fight. And he was making the move at that time to action movies. He was looking at guys like Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis and, the action stars. So Chuck turned down Bloodsport, and Van Damme got it. Now, after it was a big hit, Roger Corman, who is famous for, I don't want to say ripping off bigger budget successful films, but he does similar movies to them, right down to their titles. So he knows there's an audience for Bloodsport because it was successful. And so he called it Bloodfist. And that is, just one of Roger's probably released more movies than any producer in the world, I would say. 300, 400 movies, something like that.
And I suppose, Don, when Roger approached you about this idea, had you any hesitations at first, or were you sold in terms of his vision of what you were trying to do, or did you think to yourself, is this going to be a sort of a cheap knockoff of Bloodsport? Were you a bit hesitant at first?
Look, here's the situation. I met Chuck Norris in the late 70s, early 80s. And he was doing movies, and he suggested to me that when I retired, I move out to LA and try acting like he did. Okay. He became an actor. Bruce Lee put him in one movie, and then from then on, he was starring in his own movies. So in 1984, I had my biggest fight. I took that payday, and I moved to LA in 85. And I auditioned. I went to acting schools. I got an agent, but nothing was working. I was not getting cast because if you think about 1985, there were no Asian actors in Hollywood. Okay. Jet Li had not even come over here, and Jackie Chan had not done anything. And the only one who had a movie was Bruce Lee, but the studio they thought it was a fluke. They still were not starring Asians in Hollywood films in 1988. But finally, I got my audition for Bloodfist. And I went in and I read for the role, for the lead role. And the casting director said, wait a minute, he must have liked my performance. And he took me in to see Roger Corman and meet him, which I did. And Roger had me read. And I got maybe halfway through the audition, and Roger stopped me. Now, I can tell you this. I've been in the business now 40 years. When they stop you in the middle of the audition, usually you're so bad, they just want you to get out the door.
Yeah.
But Roger, now I know, Roger had seen enough. And he made his mind up. Because he handed me the script and he says, you're leaving in 2 weeks to go to Manila and you're going to star in this movie. And so that was the start of my career. I did 12 movies with Roger Corman, more than any other actor.
And I suppose, Don, in terms of Bloodsport going to Manila, and you're a world-class professional kickboxing martial artist champion, you go in terms of your fights, you go in to really finish them, to really sort of, it's really a business sort of in terms of your professional sporting career, coming in then choreography and stunts and filming and sort of putting on sort of stage fights. Did you find, obviously playing into camera angles and different takes of the different shoots, the different scenes, so it can be seen in multiple camera angles. Was that a sort of a different whole experience word for you to get used to?
Something I had to learn. Yes, to answer your question, yes, it was a transition. It's something I had to learn. It's not about getting close to the guy, because that's dangerous. It's about throwing your kick fast and hard and the camera being at the right angle. It's all about the camera angle. You have to either drop down, drop up, come a little closer, move to the side, go down low below your chin on a face punch or something. So it all became that part of it, the fight, not difficult physically, but in the editing rooms, in the choreography of it, the placing of the camera and the use of different lenses, close-ups, far away, slow motion became part of the things we would add. So it was a transition, going from real fighting, where I'm actually hitting guys and knocking them out, to not touching them. And matter of fact, I take pride in the fact that I don't hurt the stunt guys, that I can make it look violent without making a mistake. And that's not the same. There's many actors in Hollywood, I do not want to name them, that hurt their stuntmen regularly. They hit them too hard. They make mistakes. They're not careful on the set where they're, even, I could mention one because he lost a lawsuit. Van Damme poked a guy's eye out with a fake knife. He swung it and he hit the guy on the eye, and the guy's blind now. I mean, I'm not going to do anything that's going to be dangerous for someone else. I've put myself in many dangerous situations in my movies, but I will never ask someone else to do that for me in a fight scene. Oh, I got to make one exception. There is one guy, a friend of mine, James Liu. Because people ask me, have I been stunt doubled in my fights? There's one fight scene I use a stunt double because of the danger. And it was in Ring of Fire. And it was when a guy was supposed to be swinging a sword at me. And it is a katana. It is a real sword, but it's not sharpened. But still, the point is sharpened. And if you get hit in the face with that sword when I was supposed to do a kick that I don't do, you're literally upside down. It's like doing a cartwheel in the air. It's butterfly kick, I think it's called, but it's a kung fu technique, which I never did.
Yeah.
So I had a stunt double, and his name is James Liu. And later on, we end up, he starred in a movie called Red Sun Rising with me. He played the bad guy in that one. But James Liu is a choreographer out here and a phenomenal martial artist. And that's my one time that you can see a Don Wilson fight, and it's not actually me doing the technique. All the other ones, it was me. I never used a stuntman before or after that technique.
And I suppose, Don, at the time, going back in 1989, in terms of shooting Bloodfist, and you obviously, it was a big sort of movie for you in terms of kickstarting your sort of career. And obviously, the fight scenes are epic. In terms of, I know it's over 40 years now, but in terms of those schedules, sort of those fights, did each fight maybe take a week in terms of choreography just to get it right, to get all the angles where you look? Was it a 6-month production in terms of Bloodfist?
No, let me tell you something. Jackie Chan, I've heard now. I know Jackie Chan, I've met him, and but I've heard for one fight scene, he will shoot for 2 weeks. One scene. I do not have that luxury. The budgets determine how long you can shoot. I have times where I've gone to the set, the choreographer shows me the moves I've got to do in the fight scene. I rehearse it a couple of times, maybe 3 times with the stuntman that's going to work with me, so that nobody pokes each other in the eye and kicks each other in the face. So we know where all our techniques are going, what they're going to look like. Then we shoot it. And we will do 3 takes, 4 takes. That's it. We don't have time for any more. So, it's not making excuses for the look of my films not being as complex and as complicated and as long and drawn out and as exciting as maybe Jackie Chan or Jet Li or some Matrix. But we do not have that time in low budget filmmaking. We choreograph it sometimes right on the set. Look, I have had fight scenes where we choreographed it the day before and we rehearsed it a few times and then got to the set, we were ready to go. But that is very rare in independent low budget films. Many times you got to go right from the set that you're going to shoot in. In other words, we don't even have a fake training area. We're on the set, and so time is money. Now, the director's not going to shut the whole crew down and have everybody just sitting around waiting while we're choreographing. What they'll do is they'll shoot some other part of the movie. They'll shoot it somewhere else at the location. And then when we're ready, which maybe we will have to get ready within 2 hours, let's say, he comes back and we start shooting. And so that's how fast it's got to go. And I will say, when I first started in 1988, it was pretty tough. It was tough being safe because you got to be fast and powerful looking on film. But when you've only choreographed it and you practice it maybe 15 minutes before, it's a little dangerous. There's a certain danger element there. What if I forget a move, or he leans a few inches too close, and I'm right in the middle? I do a spin kick, and I'm right in the middle. I can't stop the kick. I mean, it is not a without risk doing lower budget, independent martial art action fight scenes. There's a certain amount of physical risk involved, and it goes with the territory.
And I suppose, Don, in terms of Bloodfist back in 1989, it was iconic. And given the success of the movie, did that inspire you to go down the route? Did you take it one movie at a time, or after Bloodfist in 1989, did you think to yourself, right, we sign on and do another 2 or 3 movies?
Well, I had moved to LA to make the transition eventually to actor. Like Chuck Norris said, when I get ready to retire, which I was in the end of my career, I moved to LA, and you got to take acting lessons. I mean, I was a kickboxer. It took time to be ready to carry a movie, right? So I moved out in '85. I didn't do Bloodfist until '88. So I had 3 years of being a fighter and an actor. Taking the acting lessons, going to auditions and things. So I had some experience in that. But when you can only do the movies you're offered, correct? I mean, unless you're the producer and you put your own money up, which I've never done. I've done what they call co-produce, which means somebody is producing a movie and I come in as a co-producer, which means whatever rights he has, I have the same. And I would do that. People would offer me a lot of money and I'd turn down the money. Instead, I would take the co-producer credit. So I could control the script, the rewriting of it, the director, who's going to direct it, the editing. I could go in the editing rooms. I even worked on the posters of my movie. So I traded, and I was advised to do this by Roger Corman, by the way. Roger Corman said, Don, you're going to make these independent, lower budget films in the early part of your career. He said, don't go for the money, because the higher money they offer you means the worse the movie's usually going to be. Because if they get you, they're not going to have the money for the movie. They're going to give the star all the money. And then, so I literally followed Roger Corman's lead. He kind of coached me on what I should do in the beginning. He did not make me exclusive to him, though. I did 12 movies for him, but I did 6 movies for PM Entertainment, which was one of the up-and-coming action movie companies in Hollywood at the time. And then I did, I think, 6 movies for Andrew Stevens and Ashok Amritraj, which were 2 producers in Hollywood I worked with. But I mean, I'm unusual in the sense that I work with the same producers over and over, and most actors do not. They do one movie for one producer, one for another, one. But 12 with one guy, Roger Corman. Yeah. That I think that's the most. Pretty sure that.
And I suppose, Don, in terms of the Bloodfist, I was looking through them. I seen a good lot of them. One of you sort of Bloodfist 1 and 2 start to follow on from each other. But one of my favorite Bloodfist, having watching it, was Bloodfist 3, the prison forced to fight. That really stood out to me. The story in that is very, very good. It's a sort of riveting.
Something a little embarrassing to me about that movie.
What?
That movie, the script was given to me by Roger Corman, and his head of production was named Mike Elliott. Now, the guy who had Mike Elliott's job before him was James Cameron. And that means right below Corman was Mike Elliott. He gives me the script, and I said, I don't want to do a prison movie. I said, that's not going to be exciting. There's no beautiful girls. There's no car chase scenes. There's no shootouts. There's no explosions. I said, nobody wants to sit around watching a prison movie. And he looked at me and said, Don, look. He goes, this is a very good script. And he said, it'd be good for your career. It'd be good for people to see you. He said, trust me, do this movie. And so I said, okay. So I reluctantly did it. Now I can tell you, after 30 years of being in Hollywood, being in the business, I'm probably more proud of that one. So it's one of the ones I'm the most proud of that I was in.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good, now, I have to admit.
One thing, Richard Roundtree. I don't consider myself a star of that. They may have put my name under the title and people watch it for the fight action and things, but the real guy who carried it, the most powerful character in the movie to me is Richard Roundtree. You know, he was the quote, and all prisons have these guys, from what I understand.
Yeah.
These prison lawyers, like guys, like they're prisoners, but they help all the other ones with their legal problems, and they're like mentors to them and things. And that's the way I pictured him. He had that, and he really loved the script, Richard Roundtree. You know, that's why he did the movie. You know, I mean, none of them had ever heard of me, any of the guys on the set. In fact, they thought I was a fake champion, like I was lying, because you know Van Damme said he was a world champion, right?
Yeah.
He's a undefeated world kickboxing champion. Now I'll tell you something. He is undefeated. When you've never had one fight, you got no losses. You are undefeated, probably, right, in kickboxing.
Yeah.
You're undefeated. Well, but that was on Van Damme's original poster. But what happened was there was a cease and desist letter. The real world champion was named Bill Superfoot Wallace. He sued the company, Canon, because in America he could show it damages him when somebody else. Van Damme actually advertised middleweight champion. That was Bill Wallace's title. I was a light heavyweight, so I didn't say anything about it. But I knew Van Damme was not a world champion kickboxer. To my knowledge, he never had one pro fight. Never even a rated fight. You got to fight 10-round fights. A few of them to be in the top 10 in kickboxing. Then to win a world title, you got to fight 12 rounds. If you go to YouTube right now and punch Jean-Claude Van Damme 12-round world title fights, nothing's going to pop up. He was never a world champion. But anyway, it ended up being good for me because when Roger Corman was going to do his movie Bloodfist, he thought Van Damme was a world champion. So he was looking for a world champion. That's why they got my name from a karate magazine. I'm not really sure which one they called, but there are several karate magazines, Black Belt Magazine, Inside Kung Fu, Inside Karate, and their publication houses are in Los Angeles. So Roger Corman's head of casting just called them and said, hey, do you have any world champions that live in LA? And they gave them my number. They had my number at the magazines because I'd done many interviews. And that's how it got about. I can credit Van Damme for starting my career, but I still don't want to lie about him and tell people he's a world champion when he never was.
I suppose, Don, you mentioned Ireland there, and it's very to have a martial arts action sort of movie in Ireland. It's a rarity as much in Ireland in terms of its coast and its scenery and Irish history, and you may have a sort of old sort of Irish connections, Irish mob type of movies, but to have a martial arts action movie, especially in the west coast of Ireland where we're from here in Clare. Yeah, and Galway is right beside us in Clare, next door sort of county as well. Coming to Ireland, did you think much of it at the time in terms of, did you want to move the Bloodfist? Was that the idea to move it internationally to different locations, or how did Ireland come into the picture?
Roger Corman wanted to start a film company there. When he had it for about 8 or 9 years, I'm not exactly how long he had it, but I shot the first movie there and the last movie.
Okay.
Now that's kind of a strange coincidence. You know, I don't know if that Roger was thinking that way, that he was planned. I have no idea. But he sent me there, and our job was not just to make a movie and come back home. We were going to train, they brought people to train the Irish people to make movies. And so I was the first my film, Trained to Fight, I think it was Trained to Kill, something. But it was the first film for Roger's company, and he made many more there in Ireland, that Irish Galway studio. And then I was called to do the very last one. And so it's a little, as far as I know, no other independent producer from America had a studio in Ireland. I don't know. You would know better than me about that. But I think Roger was breaking ground there. And I tell you what, they had martial artists in my movie. They were all very good. Oh, sorry. Well, it's a brand new phone. I don't even know how to work this thing, but I think they're gonna give up on me and hang up soon. I hope. But
yeah.
But anyway, I didn't know much about Ireland when we went there, but I had a great time. I loved it. Now the last time, years later, when he asked me, of course I jumped at it because I already knew. One of the things that shocked me was how good the food was.
Mm.
You know, I'm sure they have Irish restaurants in America. They have some Irish pubs, you know, copies of Irish pubs. But nobody talks about that I know talks. Gosh, I'm sorry, I don't know who.
No problem.
Just you know, it could even be like one of those. Could be like a robocall, not a real person, just somebody calling my home phone.
Um, Don, in terms of shooting scenes in Galway, down along Ayr Square, one of the busiest streets in Galway, you can see the sort of pedestrians in the background, and you're having sort of shoot scenes and gun
We would be
scenes.
in jail in LA. We would be in jail if we just run around it without telling the people, because they were real people, and
Yeah,
I don't know if they got on film, but some of them might have run for real because guys were running carrying guns.
Yeah.
You know, and we would get killed in LA. You know, the LAPD. If you have not fully warned everybody, you cannot shoot a scene with guys running around with fake guns shooting them in LA. Just think about it. You know, we have gangs that run around with real guns. So yeah, that was an experience. But you know what? Everybody, it seemed like we had the community was behind it. I think the people all knew what was going on. They were, I'm sure, forewarned that we'd be filming whatever location we were using, and so people knew, and I'm sure a lot of them were extras just to have fun, to do a quick scene and then be gone. So you know, it was a good experience all the way around. You know, I got along with, you know, I'm part Irish, by the way. People ask me, I'm Irish Japanese. My father's family, the Wilson, actually either Scottish or Irish, but it's around there. They came and they settled in middle of America in Illinois, and I was born here. So on my father's side, who is white, Caucasian, it's Irish American. So people asked me, they said, well, you're Irish American. I said, yes, I love to drink, but I can't hold my liquor.
Don, in terms of Bloodfist, I mean, you did 8 movies in terms of the franchise Bloodfist. Very, very iconic, I suppose. In terms of being involved in such a franchise, you said you picked sort of what movies you had and sort of an influence in the sort of a role in sort of Bloodfist.
All the other ones I worked on, yeah.
In terms of maybe the 8 movie, did you feel at that time that you'd covered every sort of angle that you wanted to do in terms of Bloodfist, or had you more ideas that you sort of wanted to touch on, or did you feel maybe that like Die Hard, like Lethal Weapon, like Police Academy, once you got to 5 or 6, that maybe that you felt that the audience mightn't keep coming back for more?
Well, here's the thing. I'll tell you the evolution of Bloodfist. As I came on as more of a co-producer, and I started, basically I would pick the stories, I would come up with the stories myself, and they'd hire a writer, they'd write the script, but then I would, or, you know, it's called mutual approval. Roger would have somebody, or I would have somebody, and we both would agree that he would be the director. And I even worked on the casting. But here's what ended up happening. I did the 8 Bloodfists. Then Roger sent me the script for a 9th Bloodfist.
Okay.
And the script was a science fiction, and it was to be shot in the Philippines.
Okay.
Where the original Bloodfists were. But what it was too similar to Bloodfist 1.
Okay.
But Roger said, well, you know, the people don't want it. It's going to be a whole new audience because that was a long time ago. You know, he said that was at the time maybe 20-something years ago or 15 years ago. So he said, you know, it'd be a whole new audience for the movie. So he still wanted to make it. But I kind of didn't want to redo a movie I'd already done.
Yeah.
Even though I did it with Guy Trying. But it was about a fighter in the future, though. It was called Bloodfist 2050.
Okay.
So that was the year 2050 it was supposed to be. And that fighter's brother gets killed, and it ends up being his trainer. Well, that's the basic story of Bloodfist, and I didn't want to remake it.
Yeah.
But I think Roger might have thought that I wanted more money,
Okay.
or that I wanted to work with bigger budget movies, or I wanted, in other words, Roger, because we never worked together again after that. When I
Okay.
said no to that Bloodfist, it was like maybe he thought that, but we've never discussed it. Well, the last time I had communication with Roger is a Chinese producer named Henry Luck, Luk,
Okay.
bought the rights to a bunch of Corman's movies, and he bought all the Bloodfist series. And he
Okay.
would only buy the Bloodfist series if I would do the TV series in Beijing.
Okay.
So Roger is trying to make this sale. So he called me and he asked if I would be interested. I said, yeah, I'll do a TV series. Sure. I said, I'd love to do it. I'm like Chuck Norris. I'm getting a little lazy in my older years, and it'd be much easier just to play one character for 8 years like Chuck did. Walker. And it's
Yeah.
one location. Walker, he didn't have to travel all over the world. Like I shoot all over the world. But, at a certain point, Chuck wanted to stay in Texas and just shoot I guess you
Yeah.
shoot like 20 episodes and then you're done for the year. He
Yeah.
didn't do movies then. He just did the Walker, Texas Ranger. So anyway, I had an opportunity to do that in Beijing. Here's what happened to it. It was all set to go. I believe the showrunner was John Fusco, who's a
Okay.
studio guy. He's big. John Fusco wrote Forbidden Kingdom for Jackie Chan. And Jet Li was it. It was called Forbidden Kingdom. So he's a A-list writer, but he was going to be the quote showrunner because writers run the TV series. And anyway, so it was going to be shot in Beijing. It was all set up, and then the Trump trade war started. When Trump started problems with China in the trade war, and the producers said, "Look, it's not we don't want Americans coming over here now. The government, it's still a communist government. So if you start trouble in one area, it's the whole country you're starting trouble with. It's the government. They run everything. They run their entertainment business. So the series was put on hold. So I don't know. Things get good with them. And because then after that, we had the virus, and Trump called that the Trump or the Chinese virus, right? So it's like they're mad at us for that, and Trump was not doing things right with China, and so that put the hold on my TV series in Beijing, and that was going to be based on Bloodfist. But now, Bloodfist is not a real sequel. I'm not the same character. I asked Roger Corman, what does these sequels mean? He says it means Don the Dragon Wilson's a star, and it means there's martial art action in it. So that's what we're going to do with the TV series is I would be a reoccurring character, possibly, but they would be using a lot of Chinese actors and, of course, flying in U.S. actors because the U.S. actors can work internationally.
Yeah.
But nobody really knows these Chinese TV actors that would be in it. But they don't need movies to sell overseas. They can make all the money they want in Beijing alone, in their own country. And so it wasn't a big concern. But for the U.S., I think, it would be a great thing to have because they were going to shoot two versions. One was going to be in Cantonese and I'll be dubbed. The other version, all the Chinese actors would be able to speak English. So there'd be I've never filmed TV, and that sounds pretty tough to do. You're basically shooting two shows, right? You got to do all the ones in their language, but I'll be dubbed, so it doesn't matter as long as my lips are moving. It's fine. But then they'll have to do another take where they're speaking English. So
I suppose, Don, in terms of Bloodfist, it was really sort of all audience could relate to it. I suppose it was geared more towards the, I'd say, 18 to 36 adolescents that really liked these sort of martial arts, that liked these sort of action movies. It had the action, it had the beautiful women, it had that
certain
sort
elements,
of...
yes. Certain elements had to be in every one to be successful. But here's the thing. When Bloodfist was first made, Roger Corman was not a distributor of videos, or he was not a big distributor on theatrical. He did do some small releases. But what happened was he made that movie and pre-sold Bloodfist to MGM.
Okay.
Now that's a big company in America.
Yeah.
That's the one with the big lion. That's a studio. So he had to release it in the theaters in America because back in those days, in 1988, direct-to-video was like an embarrassing name to put on a movie. Oh, this is a direct-to-video. Like MGM didn't want to say, we make direct-to-video movies. They wanted to say it was released in the theaters and now. So what happened was That movie was released in the theaters, and it made a lot of money for Roger. I think it grossed in 50 theaters. I think it grossed 1.7 million. I think that's the number. You can look it up though. You can just Google Bloodfist theatrical gross, U.S. theatrical, and it'll probably come up 1.7 million. Now look
That's
at it.
roughly 107 million or 250 million in today's world.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a lot more because
Yeah.
first of all, it's cheap to go to movies back then. It probably cost like $3. So it's more people saw it, and it was only in 50 theaters.
Yeah.
You know, movies in our country would get released 2,000 theaters, and it was only in the theaters for 2 weeks because Roger was expecting to lose money in the theaters, right? But he would still make it up because he had pre-sold the video rights to MGM. So what happens is the movie sold over 60,000 videos. Now in those days, in America, just the U.S. alone. So in those days, the videos sold for, let's say, approximately $50 each. So 60,000, it's like it made 3 million on video alone for MGM. Roger thought it was a fluke because you know, he said, well, Don Wilson's a star, but he's never done a movie. So Roger didn't realize I was already a world champion I'd been a world champion for 8 years. So I was known all over the world, like Chuck Norris was. That's why people were surprised that Chuck Norris was immediately got an audience. You know, he's a guy who never appeared in any movies. Then he's in Good Guys Wear Black, Force of One, these early movies of his, and people all knew him because he was a world famous martial artist. That's why Bruce Lee wanted to beat him up in Return of the Dragon, because all the martial artists in the world knew it was Chuck Norris he was fighting in the movie. Now, studio executives didn't understand that. They didn't understand that's what separates me and Chuck Norris from all the other guys you see in the movie. From Van Damme, from Seagal, any of them, Speakman, any martial artist, even Jackie Chan, Jet Li. If they were not doing movies, no martial artist would even know who they were. But if Chuck and I had never done a movie, we were famous already as martial artists. Bruce Lee was the same way. It was not a fluke that his movies were popular. He was a famous martial artist who then went into the movie industry. You know, and all the martial arts community. And look, it's not just a martial artist. Like if a martial artist goes to see a movie, all his friends know he's a martial artist, let's say. They're going to ask him, hey, is this a good martial art movie? So they're going to listen to his point of view. And it's like having critics all over the world who love your genre. They already love Chuck Norris and me as competitors. So they're going to give us a good reference to all the people that ask them. It's really a phenomenon that only happens with me and Chuck because we're the only ones that were famous before we did the movies. The other ones, like Seagal and Van Damme, are famous because of the movies, not because of what they did in martial arts.
Don, just a quick question came to me there, and it's just a bit off subject in terms of that. But around the 90s, there was two famous sort of fighting franchise, video game sort of franchises in terms of martial arts.
Mortal Kombat?
Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. Were you offered roles in Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter?
Street Fighter. I got called in, yes, and they were interested in me. But listen, I didn't know Van Damme was in the movie. I didn't know he was going to be the star. I wouldn't have even gone in red for it because, you know, Van Damme and I, we don't get along. We haven't gotten along since the 80s. And the reason is not his movies. Like I said, I owe him as an actor because his movies revitalized martial art movies. It's because of the lying about being a kickboxing champion. I do not support going around lying. It's like if you're an Olympic swimmer and you know there's a guy who says, hey, I'm a gold medalist. And you know he doesn't know how to swim. And then people come to you and say, hey, how great of a swimmer was he? You would tell him the truth like I do. I said, well, he never swam. He's never swum in competition. Well, Van Damme's never been a world champion kickboxer. So that's where we don't get along. As far as the movies, I like his movies. And, you know, I've seen some of his more recent ones. He's become a much better actor now. You know, in the very beginning, I think he was not as good as he is now. He has developed and he's progressed he's evolved as an actor. I've got a lot of respect for him in the film business. He's lasted a long time. But just don't say you're the undefeated middleweight kickboxing champion of the world and we'll get along.
And Don, you mentioned about Asian actors there, and just while we're on that subject, in terms of Mortal Kombat, the main actor was Robin Shaw, who played Liu Kang. Did you actually see the movie, and what did you think of the martial arts in that movie?
Oh, I like it. I like that. It's a fantasy movie. It's not meant to be realistic. It's not meant to look like The Bourne Identity or something, Jack Reacher
Okay.
or so. It's kind of like a fantasy movie. So
Mm.
that kind of martial arts looks good. I mean, I don't usually do some wire work and all, the flamboyant, um, over the top, I call it. It's not realistic, but it
Mm.
looks beautiful. It's like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I love that movie.
Mm.
And those people can fly. I mean, that's not realistic, right? They just
Yeah.
jump up in the air 100 feet and they're flying over the trees. But movies don't have to be realistic for me to like them. Um, uh, the creative um, aspect of it has to fit the storyline. Like with the Matrix, it's not reality, so Keanu Reeves can fly, jump off of a building and things. But for me, you wouldn't see a movie where let's say I'm a cop in L.A. It's a realistic movie. It's a gang about two gangs fighting, and then all of a sudden I jump 30 feet straight up in the air.
Mm.
I don't do that. I've had producers who wanted me to do that, and the
Yeah.
directors wanted to shoot it that way, and I had to stand there. I said, no, it does not fit this film,
Mm.
and I wouldn't do it. And I think you can get a reputation in LA, and I might have gotten ones that said, oh, he's hard to work with.
Mm.
But the thing is, I know my audience, and the 30 movies I've been the star of, not one of them has ever lost a dime. They were all profitable. Now, there's not many actors who can actually say that, even A-list actors. And they're working with the best directors, and they have the studio behind them, and they have big budgets. They make movies that lose money.
Mm.
At the budgets that I've made movies, that's a big that Roger Corman warned me. Like I told you in the very beginning, you can make really bad movies that nobody likes. The music is bad, the sound effects don't work, the story doesn't make sense. You can really kill your career, the way Roger put it, very early on. And of the martial artists who were working back in the 80s and 90s, because a lot of guys were doing movies, right? I wasn't the only one, but I'm the only one of the only ones that is still starring in movies now. I still appear in movies. I still work in movies, and although I have been making the transition to TV, I've had several. This is not the first series I had, the one in Beijing. I've got another one that the pandemic put the brakes on with a guy named Chuck Zito. I don't know if you know Chuck Zito, but
Okay.
he and I were going to do a TV series in Kazakhstan.
Okay.
And and it was all set to go for Netflix, and then we had the virus. The virus came and just shut everything down. It stopped all the production. So I may be making the transition to TV, which is not a problem for me.
And I suppose, Don, lastly, before I let you go, in terms of Bloodsport now, in terms of to summarize Bloodsport, the first one back in 1981, in terms of what it meant to you, if you could sum it up, if someone asked you to say Don the Dragon Wilson, in terms of what Bloodsport 1989, in terms of a cult classic movie, an iconic movie for its time, if you could sum it up in 2 sentences, what would you like those 2 sentences to read?
I am a big fan of Enter the Dragon, and I aspire to have just a portion of the charisma that Bruce Lee had in his films. Have never attained it yet, but it gives me something to aspire to. And Bruce Lee actually put his philosophy in his films. When he broke the board and he said boards don't hit back. Well, that's what he used to say in about demonstrations like that in reality. He just wrote it into his movie. So that's what I would say, is that I would look up to Bruce Lee as the one, and he was mixed. He's not 100% Chinese. He's Asian, I believe British. I think his mother was half British, English. But I emulate him. And then as far as martial artists today, Chuck Norris would be the one that I would look up to. And in one sentence, it was I would be like, I hope to follow in Chuck Norris's shoes, because he was a real fighter who was famous as a fighter before he did movies. And he went from movies to TV, which I've already told you that I'm kind of looking at that myself would be a nice thing, and So yeah, that's if you want to compare me to any martial art actors, because a lot of people say, oh, you're like Jet Li and Jackie Chan, and I'm not as much like them as I am, in my mind, Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee, who had reputations as martial artists before they did the movies.
On that note, Don the Dragon Wilson, an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And our special cult classic movies feature, reliving the 1989 classic movie Bloodfist, which would lead to another 7 movies afterwards. Such was its popularity. Bloodfist 1989, going back 40 years into the vault this week for a special edition, looking back on Bloodsport, the star of the Bloodfist, the star of the Bloodfist franchise, Don the Dragon Wilson. A pleasure having you today. No doubt a busy time for you in 2021, and for us all we have to say to you at the moment is Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Don.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for having me speak to your listeners, and happy Christmas and New Year's.
Cheers. Take care, Don.
Bye.